Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Everything these days is connected. Your customers are all connected. Are your gas pumps hooked up? Your HVAC hooked in? Your ice machine? Your competition literally knows everything that's happening in their store, but do you? We're going to hear from a couple guests today that are going to tell us how to get started and what you can do. Welcome to Convenience Matters. I'm Carolyn Schnare with NACS.
And I am Donovan Woods with Fuels Institute and NACS. And I'm happy that we have really cool guests here today, Carolyn. We have Stephen Babb as well as Justin McCullough from FSG Smart Buildings. Now, Stephen, maybe you can help introduce our audience into FSG. What exactly do you do?
Thanks for having us on today, Donovan and Carolyn. FSG does a little bit of everything from lighting and technology and signs. Our division specifically is focused on smart buildings and really ushering businesses of all sizes into the future with connectivity, data analytics, things of that nature.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, when we talk about IoT, I hear that term all the time, especially on the Fuels Institute side as it comes to connected vehicles. Does that really exist for buildings? And I also hear it with smart cities, but specifically for a C-store, a retail outlet store, is that something foreign, or is that what you really exist for, to kind of introduce that to this industry?
IoT, or Internet of Things, it seems like it is a fairly new concept, but if you really dive down deep into it, you'll see that retailers of all sizes have really been using smart technology for quite some time. The usage of smart controls for HVAC systems and lighting systems has been in place for in fairly commonplace to that end for quite some time. We're just now starting to find new applications for pretty much anything that you can imagine. If you want your walls to speak, if you want to gather data off of any piece of equipment, you can do so by way of a sensor speaking to a software application in a cloud. And then you can do whatever you want with that data, and whether it's creating reports, making assumptions, trying to optimize your business and operate it more efficiently, you're absolutely able to do so.
So you mentioned, I heard you say the walls that speak. Now, this is something that's been in the news repeatedly over the last several months, is the walls that listen as well. So, with all of our Alexa devices and you name it, Google, and my house is wired completely, and sometimes it just goes haywire and lights just come on and it says like, Alexa turned everything on. I'm like, please don't do that. Please stop doing that. Can you turn the alarm off? And we're yelling at her. But I know that that's different when you're looking at big infrastructure systems and operations and controlling everything. However, I can imagine there's enough of a concern about safety, but that's something that being a smart building, for instance, can probably help with. I mean, in terms of food safety, or making sure everything stays on and where it's supposed to be, or even hackers and keeping them in and out of what you need them to, and data abilities and whatnot. Stephen or Justin, is this something that you're seeing rise to the top of mind of retailers of what they're trying to protect their customers for or themselves against?
Yeah, I think so. So there's a few things in what you've just unpacked there. In the residential space, things going haywire is not such a surprise. But in the commercial and industrial environments and C-store environments, what we're trying to do whenever we install these kinds of solutions for lighting and HVAC and life safety for fire and other things is sort of fell on. So all critical systems, if we have power loss, or if we have connectivity loss, because all of this obviously is around getting it out to the web or to cloud environments using 5G and cellular services and those kinds of things. So the default installation in an enterprise or business space is safety first. And so that's one thing I want to put everybody at ease on. If you have any professionals doing this work, you're not going to experience some of the same things you might experience in the residential space, where you have a different kind of installation process and it's much more plug and play. These are typically master systems integrators. They're electricians. These are people that are highly qualified in the install process. They're dealing with power on a regular basis going in and out of these businesses. So as you think about that, while we have sensors, we like to just refer to them as kind of lick and stick sensors because they really do install easily. They still get commissioned into as some sort of an environment where software and building controls data is all coming together. And in that commissioning process, we make sure that things don't fail in a non-elegant way. So it's elegant failure, if that makes sense. So instead of all your lights being turned off, they're all turned on, right? Obviously, you don't want that to be the case in a normal situation, but that's how we would approach something like that. But in terms of security itself, there's really two big parts of security. We have what a lot of folks would think about as network security. How do I protect my data and all of my personal identifiable information? And that's all really sort of on the firewall side. The IT directors get real involved in that stuff. But then we also have the physical layer of security, right? How do I make sure I don't have theft? How do I make sure my hot dogs aren't walking out the back door? And those kind of things. And so we use sensor technology to send alerts and to monitor those things on the data side and on the connectivity side without necessarily being so much a discussion around what the infrastructure or the IT environment looks like. Instead, it's more about what the physical environment looks like and what do you want to watch out for. And we help automate those things you might want to watch out for, like doors being open too long, system alerting and alarming. So that's kind of how we think about security from a physical standpoint, all the way out to, for example, the forecourt and the actual possibilities of a cabinet breach, the lower cabinet or the upper cabinet at the dispenser for skimmers and things like that.
A second ago, or maybe about a minute ago, you mentioned the statement that I don't think we've heard in the same line. You mentioned elegant, and you also mentioned lick and stick. So just that alone, I got to know more about what's going on in this industry. So with that thought, not that thought, but just the idea of, if I'm a retailer, and I there's always new things being positioned in terms of you have to have this, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. How do I make the call to make sure that my stores are actually going in this direction? I'm assuming that at this rate, there's no going back where we won't have more things being connected, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a quote that Jeff Bezos recently had, the CEO of Amazon, at a conference. I think it was sometime this year, a couple months ago, and he's talking about at one of his estates, he has two fireplaces in his reading room, and one of the fireplaces is got the word builder above it and a bunch of books on that side. And then the other side of the room has dreamers and a bunch of books. And what he's done is he's sort of curated this room to have all the books written by dreamers on one side and all the books written by builders, creators, innovators on the other side. And the reason I call that out is because we're now in an environment where information is so readily available and syncing up multiple partners to get something done. We're now all builders and dreamers. And so the acceleration of technology, as much as that may concern others and some people don't want to embrace it as quickly as it's coming, the truth is it's easier now to build and dream simultaneously. So to your point, Donovan, we're never going back, brother. We're going to continue to push the technology envelope because the way of the consumer is the path of least resistance, right? We see it in e-commerce. We see it in retail. Customer wants the easiest access to problem solving, whatever that may be, grocery or fuel or whatnot. So I think we're going to continue to embrace a lot of moves in the technology space. That also means you're going to have a lot of folks that are coming into retailers and C-store operators and owners saying this is the hottest thing, it's the newest thing. And in those ways, we're going to get a barrage of people who are claiming answers. And so the question becomes, are they very narrow-focused or wide-focused answers? We need to look at it as we want to create an open environment where everything can be connected. One of the things we say a lot here is an octopus with many tentacles rather than a walled garden where only special things can live inside it. So those are probably two distinctives that your listeners may want to be concerned with. Am I creating a walled garden or am I creating an octopus with many tentacles? And I would recommend the octopus with many tentacles.
You have a very visual way of speaking, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I've got these cool images going on in my head. So back to where you were talking about builders and dreamers, we're always looking towards the future and making sure that we prepare our industry in that way. And I think since you're talking a lot about power and connectivity, one of the things that comes to mind is electric vehicles. Now, Justin, I think in the past we've spoken a little bit about how retailers might want to be prepared or think ahead of things that they can put on their site, or at least if they're just starting new construction. We've had other episodes where we talk about if you're starting a build and you have no intention of putting an electric vehicle charger there yet, before you put that pad site down, consider wiring it for electrical. And I think there's so many new things coming. It's hard to keep up, especially when it comes to building and whatnot, for EVs, and their technology's changing, and the amount of power I think that they would take, I'm assuming, not a subject I know a lot about, but then connected cars, and that they can talk to the store and they can talk to the gas pump, and just so many things, especially I looked at the outside of the store of what a customer can do when they come to it. There's some ways that retailers can prepare and be ready, or at least think further into the future when they're starting to build out.
You bet. Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. There's a few things I want to comment to that. Whenever you're doing new construction versus retrofitting, that is obviously much easier. So we'll address the new construction. You mentioned something that was really important, is running power out before you put the pad site down and all that. I want to offer another point. You need to have another raceway for connectivity. And this is, I think, a really big deal. We're doing small cell 5G installations all over Texas right now. And one of the things that we continue to look at is looking at sort of power only rather than connectivity and power together. And I think that's a big point that your listeners need to be thinking about, is now it's both. It's power and connectivity. So run two raceways now. One that's maybe empty for connectivity, and those are obviously things like RJ45 connections and low voltage stuff, and another one for powering your EV station and other things that are coming. To that point, think about this. We're going to have terrestrial vehicles, terrestrial drones, I think is really the industry term for it. And ultimately, they're just autonomous delivery vehicles. Right now, pizza delivery through Domino's is being piloted with this little autonomous delivery vehicle thing. It looks like a cute little smart car, with an oven in it, basically. And then, you've got Google and Uber and Amazon all thinking about these things. But if you take a click up and you think about, like, we were in Nashville just last week, and they had all these cool little battery-powered scooters, like the Bird and the Lime scooters. Uber and Lyft are doing scooters too. All those things have to get charged. So we tend to think about EV charging stations really around a Tesla or some smart vehicle, and there's a lot of grants out there that are pushing for non-proprietary EV installation to be ready for that infrastructure. But man, we got to get past thinking about it's just a car. I think we're going to have all kinds of consumers coming in to the C-store environment because of that access. We're also going to have all kinds of autonomous partners who want to sort of lease access to that power because we can make trips quicker and things like that with autonomous delivery. So probably not what you expected in the answer, but that's what I think about it.
No, I never really thought about it before, but I guess everybody, whether it's an Uber that's in a gas fueled car or a drone that just needs to charge up for a few minutes just to get to the, I never ever thought about that, but I'm sure other people have, but I think that's something to prepare for, or at least think ahead. And who can you partner with now to be the first that offers that service to some of these entrepreneurial companies, or even big companies like Domino's.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think the other part is, if you have connectivity on these EV stations, that means you can get the data. And I think we want our retailers having access to as much data as possible, federated data that is sort of for the entire group in the cohort to have access to, but also your own independent data. And there's a lot of systems right now that do data tracking, but it's really up through that particular supplier or vendor or manufacturer. And I would recommend we think about EV stations having metering and dwell time and all those things on it, because right now that's not expected in an EV station. But ultimately, those are the kinds of data points we're going to want to correlate it to transaction logs, our retail environment. Is this helping with our grab and go merchandise? What is it telling us?
So there's an example I'm thinking of when I think about when it comes to Internet of Things and C-stores or retailers, and that is Amazon Go, and just the idea of not having people in the store. You come in and you pick up something, and it charges based on your phone or your smartwatch, whatever it may be. Is that the only example? I mean, people still want jobs. People still want to have the customer interaction with their staff. So you still want to have your staff educating your customers. You still want them there because it's a personal experience in some stores, and we don't want to lose that. What's the fear, or how can we get over those fears of going this route, but yet losing touch with our customers, making them just data points instead of actual people?
The perspective that we've taken on it is almost quite the opposite. Well, the Amazon Go model is really cool. It's convenient. It's probably going to work in a larger metro area. To Justin's point about the EV chargers, there's dwell time, 30 to 45 minutes to charge your car. Those customers have to go somewhere, and they want to be delighted with an awesome experience. So right now, a lot of C-store employees are having to focus on tedious tasks, inspecting dispensers, inspecting food temperatures, leveraging an Internet of Things network to monitor those things actively instead of passively, or passively rather. Allows the employees to focus on delighting the customer, keeping the bathrooms clean, making sure the shelves are stocked, making sure customers are taken care of. So it's a place that they actually want to hang out for a little while their electric car charges, or, so they spend more money in the store. Because right now, only 50 or 44% of customers are actually going inside. So if they are inside, you want to make sure that you're providing a good experience. And right now, people are able to do that. And so we feel with leveraging technology, you really are empowering your employees to focus on the things that aren't going to drag them down, but allow them to keep a good mood and positive and upbeat, and transfer that to customers as well.
So, Stephen, to that end, you made me think of something. I talk a lot about disaster preparedness and in the event of power outages or things like that. But we talk about taking a store offline, and if there's a corporate store, if there's more than one of them, and they're operated out of a headquarters or something like that, we talk about being able to monitor or at least change who can see what's happening at that store. And this is a great reason to consider this for everyday readiness available. So should something happen to store number 1, store number 3 can kind of either pick up or at least see what's happening over there if it's a connected store, because then you can see, did the power go out for an extended period of time? Is that food safe? Because I know if the power does go out and a retailer goes back and it doesn't appear like anything happened, they might continue to serve whatever was in that cooler. But they might not have been there and known that the power was out for 6 hours, at which point that food warmed to a level that shouldn't be eaten or sold. So I think this has a lot, even beyond the implications of food. But I think this allows for a better readiness for businesses overall.
You're 100% spot on there. I mean, cold food needs to stay cold. Hot food needs to stay hot. Those sandwiches that you're keeping in your deli coolers have to stay below 40 degrees. If they're above that for even 20 minutes, you have rapid bacteria growth, never mind that 6 hours that you mentioned. So having an intelligent system in place that lets you know, look, there's a problem here. You need to mitigate this so you don't lose thousands of dollars having to throw food away, right? But it's done centrally as well. So whether you have one location or even 1,000, you have that immediate oversight over all those locations, over every piece of equipment inside your building. And that's what I said earlier about letting your walls talk. I mean, it's a cute phrase that we've said forever, what if these walls could talk? But now you're really giving your equipment a voice. It's kind of like the movie Up. It's an analogy I like to think about when I explain to people what I do, right? In the movie Up, there was that dog, the inventor had the collar, he put the collar on the dog, and suddenly you knew what the dog was thinking or saying every time it barked, right? So same idea, you're putting a sensor on a piece of equipment, and so it can let you know when there's an issue. Clearly, this thing's not going to be, fully personified and have a literal voice, but in the sense that data acts in much the same way.
Yeah, and to that point, guys, I mean, what you're touching on is multi-site visibility. And we basically have 2 proprietary systems, and I'm sure others do as well that I can't speak to, but I'll just share the essence of this. One is really about unifying multi-site for lighting, HVAC, and all these sensors so that you can control them, see them, log in and visit any site, see it on a map, see the floor plans for those sites, all that kind of thing. That's how we address that problem today, is giving multi-site visibility. And that includes equipment uptime, things that we're monitoring, as well as being able to, for example, reset lights, turn them back on, turn HVAC systems back on, refrigeration systems, you name it. The other thing is, last year we processed about 4 million alarms through another one of our systems, because all these things are noisy. Turns out they have a lot to say when you start monitoring things. And so, and we have a 24/7 call center simply because these are the things that I think the customer needs as they go down this path to make the insights more clear, to make the actionable items come to the top. Do we need to dispatch a technician to get involved? Do we need to automate those responses? Do we need to just remotely go in and flip the switch? IT's number one question, did you turn it off and turn it back on again, right? Like we can do all that remotely. And so I think that's a great question. And the truth is, as you have multi-sites, you move down that path, and it's actually not nearly as complex as it may sound when you have a good partner who can help you navigate all those pieces.
So is this everything you're talking about? Now it's like the blurring of the roles. Would this be an IT function that should be involved, or is it the operations folks, or is it an and?
It's an and for sure. It's streamers and builders working together, right? These guys all have a lot to say in their individual domains. And what we see happens over and over again is there's a lot of wisdom and insights on multiple lines of thinking in those domains. We got to bring them together in a common conversation. And I think what you guys are doing in NACS and other partners are doing exactly that, trying to join and blend conversations where we can have a much higher level view of what's going on in the impacts of what's happening at the facility level versus what's happening on the IT side or across the portfolio of sites. So yes, it's an and.
So just one last question, gentlemen, as we wrap up. If I'm a retailer and I'm not the biggest retailer, I don't have, hundreds of stores, what would you suggest? How do you get started? What would I look at first? Am I looking at security? Am I looking at HVAC? Am I looking at when someone moves a product I know it's, off the shelves? Where do you start?
I think first, you have to understand where in your operations you would like to improve. If you let's say you live in an area that's been high risk for credit card skimming, which at this point is really any place in Texas or Florida, you might start there just to kind of get an understanding of how the tech works. We went through the same thing with the advent of the e-reader and the iPad. People still like the idea of flipping a page or dog-earing a book. But then they come to find that, the new form factor is really not that bad. In fact, it's awfully convenient, right? So it's really just a matter of getting started. Even just lighting controls and HVAC, it's something simple. It's very tactile. It allows you to be interactive with it. It's something that you'll actually do every day, as opposed to securing your dispensers. It's one of those things that you kind of hope you never have to find out that it works, right?
Exactly.
But being able to control your lights and your HVAC, that's something that you'll interact with regularly. It's something people understand. And so that would probably be the best place that I'd recommend a vendor of any size or a merchant of any size to start.
And I got to say, as an executive, I think about how we make money. And so I might counter or add the yin to the yang of what Mr. Babb just said. Let's look at everything that makes money. Let's make sure our branded signs are lit up at night so people feel comfortable driving in and spending money with us. Let's look at our gas prices sign, which we know draws people off the street to fuel with us and then get into the store. Let's meter those. Let's look at the beverage station and make sure our slushy machines, which are 90% profit, are still on and working, and that we have techs out there in a much faster cycle fixing them to get our money makers back online. Let's make sure our coolers are cold like they're supposed to be and we don't have inventory loss. So I would look at one dimension, which is just all my money makers, and then the other dimension being everything that can save me a significant amount of money. What costs a lot when it fails? Either food spoilage or HVAC technician on site just to turn something on and off. How can I get those things to where I'm spending less money on things that are preventable, and I'm making more money on the things I already know are very profitable by keeping them on and running longer.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate it, Justin. Thank you guys for being here, helping us understand the full potential of the internet and how it can help our stores.
Thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.